Welcome back to my liminal space where I talk about some random things in the game and my opinions on them so we can start a bit of a discussion in the comments. I didn't think I'd be making one of these so quickly right after the last one talking about counter events, and thank you for your feedback on that. It seemed like a lot of people did enjoy that. I really appreciate it. This time we're talking about something a bit more recent because just a few days ago, this event was revealed. This is the first time that a deck outside of black has received any sort of cost reduction, and a lot of people have been a bit fussy, to say the least, about how this game is losing color identity. So let's talk about that. On the One Piece card game, there are 6 colors, and each one of these colors has a general sort of way that they'd like to play out the game. The One Piece card game is nice in the way that it's not like red is always going to be the aggressive color, because you also have some decks like Red Shanks, but red has certain mechanics that feel like they are native to red, such as power reduction, power-based KOing, rush, and even if you go back a couple of sets, attaching rested Dong. Green historically has been about resting your opponent's characters or making your own characters active, and has recently evolved into making your Dong active as well to just have more resources than the opponent. Blue is the bouncing color, whether it puts the card back to the opponent's hand or to the bottom of the opponent's deck, and also dabbles in lots of card draw. Purple is generally the ramp color, allowing you to get to your higher cost characters much faster than the opponent. Black historically has been the best at cost-based KOing due to the fact that they have means of reducing the opponent's costs for the characters, and also has had, especially recently, lots of interactions with trash, whether it's playing things out of trash or effects that only work once you have a certain number of cards in your trash. And yellow revolves around life, whether it's an abundance of triggers that can come out of your life very suddenly, or being able to manipulate the number of life you or your opponent has. All these colors have a way in which they like to interact with the game as a whole to create a unique and interesting dynamic between all of the colors. Now, recently, even if you weren't on Twitter, you were probably hearing some screeches off in the distance from people on Twitter complaining about green, a color that's historically not black, receiving cost reduction. This is the first card outside of black to ever be able to reduce the opponent's cost, despite many other cards within the game being able to interact with the opponent's cost, like the X-Drake from OP01, for example. And while sure you can make the argument that color identity is dying with the fact that black no longer has this exclusivity to cost reduction, I actually want to argue that this is a good thing. Now, this isn't the first time that we had this sort of thing happen. At the start of this video, we mentioned that red is historically a color that revolves around a lot of rush. Now, these rush effects are now in every single other color, but the way in which you gain that rush is very often tied to the identity of the color. Take, for example, the 10 cost ace in yellow. 10 cost ace heals 1 life, and then if you have 2 or less life, then he gains rush. It's not a card that innately has rush, but has the benefit of being able to heal 1 life, lending into that yellow thematic while also having these more interesting sort of splash effects that tie into some other colors like red. Looking at another high-end rush character in a non-red color, we can see things like the secret rare Blue Luffy, who's an 8 cost 8,000 rush, which on attack, if you were to trash a card, can bounce back a 4 cost and then attach a rested dong. So it has this rush, which is naturally a red theme, but it also has the thematic of bouncing, which is very akin to blue. So in a way, it's not necessarily that these cards are focusing on the rush aspect, but rather they're focusing on the other things that they can do, whether it's bouncing back a character or gaining life, to get some more interesting effects that still play into the theme of the color. Still, while a lot of other colors have this rush theme, they aren't naturally going to be as strong as red because red is sort of the color that specializes in rush. In red, you get cards like 8 cost Dragon. 8 cost 9,000, which attaches 2 Dong to a character or leader, is really strong because minimum this card is 8 cost 11,000. A lot of the times you're just hitting for 8 cost 9,000 rush and also 7,000 with your leader, for example, just making 2 really big attacks out of nowhere. These sorts of really powerful rush cards are allowed because they're within red. Let's just not talk about the horse and the fishman in the room because those cards are a little bit too powerful for being rush cards in other colors. Not to mention that Nascero also has power reduction. But speaking of power reduction, let's talk about that as well. Another red mechanic that actually now in OP13, OP14 in the East, a lot of other colors have. So if we do want to talk about the horse in the room, Nascero is a rush character that has power reduction, which is very, very red-pilled. But to get that effect, you need to have a certain number of cards within your trash, which is black-pilled. I don't know why this sounds like I'm doing some Matrix talk, but I'm not going to say that just because you need 10 cards in your trash to use Nascero's effect that makes the card balanced, because realistically, Ema fills his trash way too quickly. So let's disregard this card. It is a little bit too strong. Let's look at Burgess instead. Now that card sucks. But still, you have these similar sorts of things, like having mechanics from other colors, but the restriction or cost of using them being tied to your color identity. Look at the Virgo from OP14. This Virgo has a top effect, which is also very powerful, but the second effect on attack, if you were to return one dong from your cost area to your dong area, you can reduce one of the opponent's characters by 2000 power. Reducing dong is a very purple mechanic and is still one of the mechanics that is almost exclusive to purple. Technically, the blue crocodile from the start deck has this as well, but that is a very old card, so I imagine this is just not really knowing how you really want to take the game in the beginning. So I'll give them a pass for that. Minusing Dong is a very purple mechanic. Shanks from the same set, OP14, if the character is rested, then the opponent's characters gain minus 1000 power. This is very similar to the 10 cost Shanks in red, but has the stipulation where this card needs to be rested. So therefore, unless you were to attack with it on the turn after or physically rest it, whether it's through things like You Can Be My Samurai or through the Mihawk leader effect, you can't actually get the effect immediately, making it sort of balanced in this way that you need to have it rested, which is a very green mechanic. Interestingly, the one card that still doesn't have power reduction as far as I could tell from my research is blue. But blue is the only other color besides red that has power-based removal. Phoenix Pyreapple. That sounds kind of cool. But yeah, this card is Bandai experimenting with power-based removal in other colors. And importantly, because it's a blue power-based removal and not red, it doesn't KO the opponent's characters, but it actually bottoms it, which is a very blue mechanic. I hope that my point's kind of getting across, where it's not that every single color is slowly turning into each other. It's that all of the colors have a sort of unique identity, and that identity isn't necessarily the only way that the game can be played, because honestly, I think the game would be quite stale if that was the only way you could play the game. But rather, by adding unique mechanics to other colors, it not only makes the synergy between dual color leaders much more interesting and better, but it also gives monocolor leaders some more opportunities and ways to deal with matchups that are historically bad. I think that Mihoku in OB14 is a great example of this, because he's really going hard into this mechanic of green, of resting your own cards. You can rest your characters, you can rest your stage, you can rest your Dong cards, you can rest any cards for his ability. And lots of his cards, like the 7 cost Shanks, really benefit from being rested. And in this way, you have a very green feeling deck that has mechanics from other colors to still make them very powerful and very unique feeling within the game. Still, red has always had this sort of color identity crisis where it has a lot of things that it can do, but it's never been able to do one thing great in the same way that black really excels at cost-based removal. But it's because black has such powerful cost reduction tools and so many colors have really good cost-based removal. Look at any of the colors that exist except for red. Red actually does have technically cost-based removal, but it's only for stages as far as I can tell. So I don't really count that. Cost-based character removal is within every single other color, and the only color that can access ways to reduce the opponent's cost to make KOing easier is black. And therefore, blue-black Sakazuki, green-black Perona, although maybe a little bit of cope there, black Luffy, and even historically purple-black Zed, which was popular before Whitebeard was found back in East, have just been really, really good due to these mechanics that existed within the game. Conversely, because red doesn't really have great ways of synergizing with other colors, as many of these other colors interact with cost and not power, red dual color leaders have generally suffered unless they're really good for the certain type synergies that they have, whether it's supernovas, navy, revolutionary army, straw hats, etc. But I don't necessarily think that every single color should have access to every single other type of mechanic. One of the big issues that purple had historically was purple being able to heal through the 9 Mom card. 9 Mom being able to heal and reduce one of the opponent's attacks by 1 was way too strong within blue purple Luffy because it felt like you were playing blue purple yellow Luffy, which was just really, really powerful for the time that it existed. It's for that reason that it was eventually banned. We haven't seen any other colors except for purple having some sort of Dong acceleration, and I think the reason for that is because Dong acceleration doesn't necessarily synergize well with other colors, it's just a means to an end. So giving that mechanic to another color wouldn't necessarily create new synergies and opportunities for colors, but rather just allow them to play their normal game plan just a little bit faster thanks to ramp cards. Because cost-based removal is so abundant within the game, so many effects are gated or even balanced around the fact that they may be used with black decks. Take, for example, Houndblaze, but in a non-blue black deck, Houndblaze is really terrible. In Sakazuki, Hound Blaze is extremely powerful just due to the fact that you have cost reduction. So I think that rather than forcing cards to be afraid of synergizing with black, the best way to solve this is just to do the thing that they did with red and give other colors ways to interact with cost. I think that it needs to be done in moderation, and the cost reduction cannot be more powerful than the cost reduction that black has access to, but I do think that it's a very welcome change because it opens up a lot of new windows. Now you don't have that question when you want to play Carrot of, well, why don't I just play Bonnie? Because thanks to iKailaKai, there's finally a reason to play Carrot over Bonnie. And specifically in Carrot, there's a lot of really interesting things that you can do with this card. Your 5 cost Carrot can now lock up to a 10 cost. The new 6 cost Carrot, which you may not have actually seen because it's from EV03, can actually KO an 8 cost on the turn that it's played because you can just rest the Carrot that has just been played for the cost of iKailaKai. And beyond main cards, because the only restriction is that your leader needs to be the Bing type, you can rest other cards, such as the 7 cost Shanks, or I think an even cooler card, 9 cost Mihawk. With 9 cost Mihawk in Carrot, you can immediately, on the turn that Mihawk is played, lock a 10 cost or less, which not even Mihawk can do. This single card, although it does seem to be a test for things to come, brings a wave of possibilities because Carrot has historically been a deck that's pretty good into aggro and mid-range decks, but heavily suffers into control decks. Now, with these sorts of cards being possible to be printed, it really gives her some new ways to actually fight with these decks and give you a reason to play her over some other decks. But still, let me know what you think about this. If you agree, make sure to hit the like button to let me know that I am not crazy in this opinion. And if you didn't like this, make sure to hit the like button anyways, because your words do hurt me. That'll be all for today. And if there's one last thing that I can ask Bandai for if we're going in this direction, is to please, please, please print a green event that is, if your leader is Thriller Bark Pirates, then reduce one of the opponent's characters by 5 cost.